Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Reena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Okay, so we are back and I'm super excited to dive into this. We may lose listeners with the title, but I have titled this, The Details Are Important. And I wanted to dive into this because we love details, especially when it comes to lots of topics. But my favorite topic that we'll start with, which is documentation and just the importance of the behind the scenes stuff that happens. It's almost like the dental care is one aspect of it, and then there's just this whole behind the scenes world that really has to happen. As far as drama, there can be a lot of drama that comes out of not getting the documentation well. I know that you can speak to a lot of that drama because of your experiences that you're connected with, not only in your own practice, but also you and I have kind of teamed up on a chart auditing program. So you've been able to dive into documentation errors that could lead to a lot of drama or that have led to a lot of drama. So I wanted to kind of dive into the importance of those details in this podcast and to really just be a good sound warning for our listeners on how critical these details are. So I want to just kind of let you open up with your thoughts on this and then we can dive in.
It's an area that none of us likes to deal with. And again, you know, we do good dentistry, and shouldn't that be enough? And I think a lot of times too, a lot of us start going, well, this is where I've trained my staff to take care of these details, so I shouldn't be bothered with that. I have put you in charge. The chart notes should be accurate. The ledger should be accurate. Why is this so difficult? There's templates involved. Use your templates. So I think it's this mindset that's uber frustrating because I'm trying to do the dentistry. Yeah. And when you think about, you know, this is where the drama comes from, in my opinion, the hierarchy, if you will. And so that's a front desk job. That's a hygiene job. That's a this job. And in a way it kind of is, because there are things that only I can do. Mm-hmm. At least in Texas, we don't have expanded function RDAs. Our hygienists can't give local, etc. So there's certain things that only I can do. And so when you tag the dollar amount value to the things that I can do, and same with the hygienist. So there's certain things that the hygienist can do that the assistants can't do. And so it does become hierarchical in that regard. It is what it is. So from a dollar value, it is, what would I rather be doing? Putting in a chart note or prepping a tooth? And so I think for the team to understand that and understand how important that is, but also for the doctor, I mean, I get it. It is kind of going, I am doing what I was trained to do and what produces the most so that I can pay your paycheck and help patients. And so somebody needs to take on this chart note stuff because it's kind of a nuisance. Huge problem with that is, do you trust the team to get in those details? And we can do our part with putting in templates and do training. But I think at the end of the day, that the part that really frustrates dentists is, dagnabbit, do I really have to do every darn thing in this office? Do I have to answer every phone call so that gets documented correctly? Do I have to do every... Kinda.
Yeah, I know.
It really depends. And so I think it's yet another frustration for a practice owner to have to go, I've got to do the dentistry, I've got to do the hiring and firing, I've got to deal with the staff, dependability, and then there's a whole compliance side. And unfortunately, again, I wish I had a better solution, but at the end of the day, it's your license, and you're going to be the one who's liable for it.
I was about to say, the risk is ultimately on the doctor at the end of the day.
And I think it's one of those things where it's kind of like, I've gotten away with this for so long until I don't get away with it. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of opened up this whole change in trajectory, almost, if you will. Like 15 years ago, when we didn't have reviews weren't a big thing. We didn't have Facebook and all of these things. And so it's like, who was going to complain? Well, patients would complain if they were perceived a billing problem or perceived a poor quality of dentistry problem. But it wasn't so pervasive. Now I think everybody wants what they want. Mm-hmm. They want it perfect to their understanding of what their perfect means. Right. I think nowadays too, when people have options and you're going, researching online and going, should I go to this dental office or this dental office? Well, this one has these reviews. Well, this one has better hours. Well, this one takes my insurance. And so patients are coming in not fully confident in the practice that they're choosing.
Right.
One thing goes wrong according to their expectation. Making a complaint is so easy nowadays. And the only thing that we have in our defense is our story.
Yeah.
And the story is the chart note. Mm-hmm. Again, do we like that? Is it fair? Is it smart to spend time on our chart note when I could be prepping? Like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And so my strong suggestion is going back, and it's got to be in those details. So does it have to be you who answers every phone call and documents? I don't know. Maybe. It depends on what your front desk person is. I mean, honestly, for me, if that was the case, I'm shutting down.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. Or I'm hiring more people, but then that has its own. What am I doing to mitigate that? I mean, for us, we've got a couple of people that act as inadvertent chart auditors. Mm-hmm. So that brings me some peace. And then just really taking the time, maybe the front, I can't answer every phone call, so I can't maybe make sure that all of those notes are in, but my back assistant notes. So one other thing we've done in our office that is certainly not the smartest financially, but we have trained, we have tried. Mm-hmm. And really where it boils down to, there's probably 2 or 3 hygienists that are really kind of best at the documentation, other than myself or one of the doctors. So we do, and it is a hygienist that's a higher dollar person having to do this kind of admin clerical type thing. But at the end of the day, if that's where the piece comes that I know it's been done properly,
it's money well spent.
It's money well spent. Now, of course, that tips off the hierarchy and the drama again, which you've seen it in our office where one of our assistants, the hygienist doesn't help turn around the room and she's just sitting there doing her notes while the rest of us have to clean up and do all of this. Well, sweet pea, as an assistant, your job description is you do those things. And I think the challenge in our office becomes, in a lot of offices, that hierarchy is just built in.
Yeah.
When you're the assistant, that's your job. In our office, where it's everybody does everything and we all help each other, and we're all a team and nobody's higher up and all that. You see me turning around rooms. I'm helping in sterilization. I'll take the trash. So in our office, everybody's a little spoiled in that regard, as though we're all equal and we're all valued. And you are equal and you are valued. But from a strategic standpoint, I have given you every opportunity to figure out how to put in a better note. We've done training out the wazoo. I used to print a bad note, call you in, sit down with you, line by line. And it's still inadequate. So no, until you can show me that you can improve your chart note, at this point, it happens to be a hygienist. Yeah. I don't really care. But if she's the one who's doing this well, then she's going to keep doing that. And that would mean you fall to the other set of skills tasks that need to be done.
Right.
So
if I can jump in on that real quickly, one of the things I would say too is, this is going years back with you and myself. Our initial thought process was, these assistants can be trained. So I think we've always tried to eliminate the risk factor of a faulty chart note or an inaccurate chart note by training. And I think we finally hit a point after we threw so much at these assistants. I mean, we pulled out all the stops to try to get them fully trained over a period of time. And when we still saw that that was not enough, I think you and I probably had maybe this aha moment where it was like, it is ultimately on the doctor. No matter how smart the assistant may be and how consistent she is most of the time with the chart note, at the end of the day, can we eliminate all the risk by dumping a lot of training into the assistants? No. Unfortunately not.
And it really depends on the assistant, right? Like, so I would say in our office, we laugh about, but our core assistant crew is, and they laugh about it too. They're like Dory from Finding Nemo.
Yeah.
Are they hands down some of the best assistants I've worked with in turning a kid around, getting along with the parent, being cheerleaders for the team? It just so happens that our 3 assistants are all the same personality strength and also the same weakness.
Yeah.
So it's just eye-opening. Like, we tended to hire without meaning to, but that's who we ended up liking in this role. And so now, certainly if I hire a different assistant who's not a Dory, and when we say Dory, like, they laugh because it is, they're your get along with everybody, and but they're super easily distracted. The details are not their strengths. And all of the assistants are like that. So if you have an assistant team that this one's your more bubbly one, but she's easily distractible. This one's also bubbly, but she's also detailed. And then you've got this one that's not so pleasant, but she's more into the detail. So it really depends on your team.
Yeah.
In our office, it just so happens that all of our assistants are kind of the same personality. And so for me to finally recognize that, and like you said, we tried a bunch of different types of training too.
Right.
It wasn't just we tried one thing. I invested quite a bit of money into that. I was super disappointed. But at the end of the day, it was like, okay, but what can I take away from this? Mm-hmm. And it was, I am pushing them into trying to get this chart note done right. And it's never to my satisfaction. So is that a me problem or a they problem? It doesn't matter. I guess it's a me problem, but it's still a problem.
Right.
And so how do I get the help I need? Because then there was a period of time where I wasn't leaving the office every day till 6. Mm-hmm. I said, I can't do that anymore either. So I started farming more out to my hygiene team and saying, hey, I need you to include this in the note. I need you to check this. I need you to check that. And then taking that off of the assistants, because at the end of the day, it was going to be my name
right
on that chart note.
Right. It was a worthwhile shift. It was a pivot in your plan where you realized this team's not going to do it, but I can expect that out of my hygiene team. And I would still say even doing that, plus we have some additional chart auditing from your management team, that you still have a lot of oversight, wouldn't you say, in that
Absolutely.
process? So talk to us about how obviously you've got your hygiene team that does a lot of additional, almost inadvertent addition or charting to make sure that note is really well done. We've also got one of your management team members that will kind of randomly, she doesn't audit every single chart, but she definitely gets into a lot of the chart notes and makes sure that there's some accuracy there.
So that ended up happening. I mean, we weren't smart about it. It's not like we were like, oh, let's put you in charge of this. That ended up just inadvertently happening because she's the person who writes the letters back. So if we've got dentist X who referred patient to us, and then she's writing the letter back, like, so your patient came, this is what we found, this was... And so while she's digging through for those details to put it in that letter, that's where she finds a lot of mistakes.
Right.
And what is the story here? Because the note says this, but the ledger says that, but mom desired this. So where are we with this? So she became the inadvertent auditor. But I love that because then we do have somebody else auditing another set of eyes who was not in the building.
Right.
So can she feel like she was in the building because the chart note was so thorough and accurate? Or are there questions? And if there's questions, that's a problem.
Right.
The other inadvertent auditor, of course, is our AR person, who's also not in the building. She works remotely as well. And so when she's trying to send a narrative or a claim and trying to figure out what happened, and I love with her is that she's not a dental person. She's been in the dental industry for, 25 years, something like that. But she's always been, it's not like she was an assistant turned front desk.
Right.
So she still doesn't know the procedures and what those entail and things like that. So for her to be able to write a narrative or make sense of what happened, that's another inadvertent audit. And if she can't make heads or tails of what happened or why we proceeded this way when the note said that, like the appointment said no fluoride. Well, the chart note says we did do fluoride, and the ledger for one kid has fluoride and the other one doesn't. What's going on here?
Right.
And so she should be able to read the chart note and not have any questions. And if she still has questions, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. So that means we did not do a thorough enough job in clarifying why that was done. So that's how we get our inadvertent audits. In addition to, each doctor is supposed to be checking the chart notes at the end of the day. So we try to do in the morning, I'm trying to check my notes as it's happening in the morning. Definitely at lunchtime, check the mornings, and then in the afternoon. So it's a lot. And I'll have dentists say, so am I supposed to stay here till 6 o'clock? Am I supposed? Yeah. If you want to stay out of trouble, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, I would recommend doing that. Mm-hmm. Or then are you lightening your patient load? What really sucks, honestly, because it's, again, goes back to that. Are you kidding me? I should be able to see patients and help patients and run a practice and not be bogged down in all these chart notes. And I hire people to help me with this. What do you mean I've got to? It's come to a stage now, again, where we got away with it before, but now the patient has changed. Mm-hmm. The expectation is I want perfection. I want it now. And if I don't get it, I'm complaining.
Right.
And so, to say that I'm not going to have a complaining patient, good luck. I think there are a lot of practices that I hear a lot from our chart audits. Oh, these patients have been patients for a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, this patient the game has changed, friends. The game has changed because there's so much more competition. There's so much more, where a patient of yours that's been a patient of yours for 10 years, but now they Facebook and somebody else in their Facebook circle is saying, well, that happened to you. That's not okay. Or this happens at my dentist. And it gets people thinking in a way that they've not thought before.
Right.
And so, again, I hear a lot from small town people. Well, it's my small town and I have a great reputation here and patients are happy here. They're happy until they're not.
Right.
And why are they not? There's different things that they're hearing. Influences. Yes. And so the only way to protect yourself, I think it's a scary gamble to say that your patients love you. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because let's be real, we all hope our patients love us, but not everybody does.
Right.
Or you have the disgruntled employee that goes and says, hey, there's just too many variables out there right now. And the only thing you have to, this was just the other day. We had on Friday, you and I had a meeting at 8 o'clock. Mm-hmm. We were talking about a number of things for the office. And as I'm talking to you at 8:10, my employee is asking me, she's like, hey, do you have time? This one patient, I had a really terrible call with that person. And I went, ugh, because this is my person who can handle all of that. Oh my gosh, she can turn a stink bomb patient into a rose. She's so smooth and charming and can get to the heart of the matter. And if she's saying this was a difficult interaction, so when you and I got off the phone, I called her. This is a patient that, because my employee's comment was, do you know this person personally? Because she was saying that she's your friend and whatever. Why does that matter? Honestly, if you're my friend, you're not going to cause problems in my office.
Right.
It's funny the people who think they're your friend.
Yeah.
And I've learned that the hard way. So anyway, we aren't friends. Our kids went to daycare together. Mm. And so we knew each other through the daycare. That was it. On hi, hello, pick up, drop off, a couple of daycare school parties. This has been a long time. But that's how I, quote, know her. As far as her being a good patient in the office, she's not. They don't come every 6 months. When the kid needs treatment, it took her 2 years to schedule treatment because she didn't believe her kid needed treatment. So you're not a good patient. You're certainly not my friend if you look at it from those perspectives. Apparently, we treated her kid last November, and then my manager was calling her on Friday, or somebody else in the office was calling because the kid's way overdue.
Yeah.
And apparently the mom got very upset, had to get the manager on the line. And so in the conversation that my manager's telling me how this woman acted, and I'm like, you know what? I hope she does text me privately, because I will call her and tell her that is unacceptable and you are never to do that in my office again. Which I wouldn't say that to a normal, quote, patient.
Yeah.
But if you're going to pretend to be my friend, I'm going to tell you exactly.
Right.
You do not talk to my team that way. And in the end, her issue, I mean, it ultimately boiled down to I think it's all guilt on her because she knows she's overdue. And, but the blame was all on our office. My kid had major surgery in November and there was no follow-up. And shouldn't you follow up on my kid? And now he's not had a cleaning. And you guys clearly don't want to help with that. I'm having to drive the bus for my own kid's health care. Well, yeah, actually you are. Really, lady.
Kind of definition of parent there.
Yeah. By the way, she's a physician and so is her husband. And just how the lack of care in our office is surprising to her, and the lack of whatever. I'm like, this lady's supposed to be my friend. So the reason I'm sharing this story is, one, it hurt my feelings. Two, if you are thinking you have a friend out there who's not going to complain against you,
right. This shows
you are fooling yourself, because this is a woman who didn't get a surprise bill, didn't whatever. I mean, it's her own guilt. We saw the kid in November.
It literally came from a recall phone call.
Yeah.
That's what's crazy about that whole story.
Yeah. Is that it came from a recall phone call. And I think that's the thing. She wanted a 5:00 appointment when she gets off of work, and we don't have that in our office. And she was having a meltdown over it. They don't live near the office anymore, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I think when I went back and I looked at it, though, because I said, oh my gosh, she's a medical professional and she's blaming our office for not being professional and caring about kids like we should be. And you are my friend because you know me through the daycare, and you have my personal text. So I went back and I went, okay, this is a woman that can complain. Caught her in the wrong mood, and she's going to say what kind of office, or she's going to put it on Facebook, or she's going to do whatever. Nobody go to that office because we're a terrible office. We don't care about your kids. So I went back to look at the facts. Well, what are the facts? So what do we have to support this? I went back and I looked, and the kid's surgery was November or whatever. There's a personal text from me to mom asking, how's he doing? 2 days later, I have documentation of another text. 1 week later, I have a documentation of another text. The kid should have been due back in May for recare. And so in that amount of time, you have not contacted me at that last 1 week follow-up text. You indicated everything was fine. So it's not like you were requesting an appointment or the kid had an issue, nothing. So we reach out to you in April. We have documentation of us leaving a message for you in April. And then again in June, we sent you a postcard. And then in July, we sent you a postcard, an email, and a phone call.
Wow.
And then now we're in September. And so we get you on the phone, and you're having a meltdown because your kid hasn't been seen in a year, and we did major surgery, and don't we do post-op care follow-up, and how could we not care about our patient? I mean, it was ludicrous.
Wow.
But if this woman complains, I have everything is documented. And so that's the point of this. It does feel good, because I felt pretty crappy at the end of all day Friday. I was just in crapville going, do I not care about our patients? How did I not?
Right.
Etc. And, but at the end of the day, if there's to be a complaint, if she's going to take this and actually launch it into something, can I cover myself?
Absolutely.
Or did we not see? And here's the other thing. We're supposed to call the patient a week later. We tell the patient we're going to call you in a week after we check on you the first couple of days. And so that was one thing when my manager and I were on the phone together. She's like, I guess we did drop the ball. We did not call her a week out. And I was like, Now, is that the be all end all? No, it should still be on the patient that you call to schedule if you want to be seen. Well, it turns out I have a text. And somehow that text wasn't in the document center. So I sent that again, and now we're going to try. So did I never send it to the team? Did somebody in my office not upload it to the document center properly, et cetera? It's a whole nother can of worms of discussion. But at the end of the day, if the state board is to come at my door and say you either abandoned this patient or you neglected this patient or you whatever, I have my story clearly delineated.
Right.
And so my suggestion now is, even for this patient, for us to email her and say, hey, we talked to you on Friday, and apparently you voiced a concern that there was no follow-up care. This is what his record shows. And lay out, because how can she complain at that point?
Right.
And like I said, ultimately it's her own guilt that she did not take the time.
But that's all it takes.
Yeah.
That's all it takes is somebody's guilt that's eaten at them, and they want to deflect and turn it on to somebody else. That's all it takes. And to your point, this lady is a quote unquote friend that's doing this, potentially raising a stink. And who knows when that could lead to the next level. So why do the details matter? We can use this one scenario to go, you know what? The details matter, first of all, from a patient interaction standpoint. Because now you can very clearly send an email or get on the phone with this woman and you've got facts that you're going off of to potentially squash a fire that's trying to brew. So that's number one. It helps with that side of things. But let's say this woman continues to kind of go off the rails and she files a complaint. You've also got the facts, which is maybe more detrimental than the patient side of it, to support yourself with the board. If you didn't have those facts, you could find yourself in some trouble from a state board standpoint. So you are protecting yourself kind of in two lanes, so to speak, directly with the patient and, if worst case scenario happens, directly with the state board because of that documentation. Also, the details that are important from this scenario, every text that happened was documented. Even the last one that didn't come through, you got that fixed, from this. So the text messages were documented. The phone call follow-ups with the patient were documented. The attempts to get that patient to schedule for recare were documented, right? So this is not even talking about the original chart note from the November treatment date, which is a whole category in and of itself. These critical details are super important because this fits the complaint. The complaint of her was, do y'all not care? You didn't even follow up. You didn't even want to see my kid back. Basically, why am I just now hearing from you? That wouldn't have been in the original November chart note. What that was is all communication documentation. So it's not just the detail of the chart note that's important, or the ledger, or those things. It's the additional communication that happens outside and in between those appointments that is equally as important.
It's critical. And so now, for example, there was no 1 week post-op call. And I start going, well, was there a call? And that person just didn't document it, because that happens a lot.
Right.
Or was there never a call? And so I happened to just go back into my text to see, was there a problem I was supposed to follow up on and we didn't? I don't remember. It was back in November. I don't know. And there I'm like, no, this was the 1 week contact.
Yeah.
So somebody in my office may have called, or it may have just been me going, hey, I got it. I know this woman. Let me just text her and see. So anyway, all of that, yes, that is, all of that matters because it paints a picture.
Yeah.
And these patients don't remember. I can guarantee you she doesn't remember. And as she's screaming at my manager, I guess she did acknowledge that we did try to reach out to her in April and that we did try to reach out. She admitted that she got those. So hopefully she got off the phone and went back and went, ugh.
Yeah.
I'm blaming them when it's not. But honestly, she may not. It may still be us. That call may have fueled her to go, see, they really don't care. She still couldn't fix it because she still didn't give me the 5 o'clock on Friday that I wanted.
Well, and this goes back to, as well, something that you alluded to earlier. We are dealing with a different set of people now. We go back to 15, 20 years ago, and we didn't have these influences of these reviews that we've read. We didn't have the influences of what they're putting up on social media and whether that's liked or not liked. We did not have this world telling us what to think about this particular office. In addition, you add now a layer of stress that I feel like has hit the world at large post-pandemic. I tell people all the time, people are just more stressed now than they have ever been before. Everything that we used to know has kind of been shaken, and we are trying to kind of reestablish and get comfortable in a world that really still is not comfortable. We're getting bad news constantly, on the news about COVID and deaths and all of this, and that is stressful. And so we are dealing with potentially a woman, this friend that you're talking about, back in November, that may have been fine in November, and for whatever reason, she is now a stressed individual. She got our phone call. We hit her at a moment where who knows what's happening personally, and she is kind of taking this and bending it out of proportion. But that's who we're dealing with now. We are not necessarily dealing with these calm, steady, non-influenced people. We are dealing with what I call volatile people now. And the only way to protect ourselves is, of course, to provide the best quality that we possibly can. But documentation, the details of that documentation are so incredibly critical. So I've got a question for you, and hopefully this will help our listeners that are like maybe being hit with this kind of reality for the first time as they're listening to this. Let's say you've got a doctor out there that hasn't truly thought about, or maybe has even kind of avoided this whole detailed world that they know they need to live in. What would your advice be to somebody who's really trying to get a grasp on, are my details really being covered in my documentation? What would your advice be from a starting point?
From a starting point, I suppose if you have a colleague that you trust, that can come in and say, hey, I want you to read these 5 charts and tell me if they make sense.
Yeah.
Certainly, and this is going to seem biased, and I'm not trying to make it seem biased at all, but we have our charting program.
Yeah.
And the reason we're doing our charting program is for this very reason.
Right.
And honestly, where the chart audit program kind of came to mind was I had a employee that was a friend, again, friends, who needs friends, right?
Right.
But she was a friend from another office. I hired her. What a disaster. And I was in the position of firing her. To this day, I ruined her life according to her. But my challenge at the time was she was so good. I mean, she could have taught dentrics, and she could do anything in pediatric dentistry short of prepping the tooth. Like, she just couldn't get along with people. She has a personality problem. And I was like, you need to be to where you could be alone in an office. And, so you should like get clients where you do all their billing and you do their chart audits and you do all of this. So I'd had this idea 5-6 years ago, brought it to you last year, when I'm trying to slow down a little bit. I'm getting a little older, and I'm letting associates do a little bit more just because I'm tired. And then my colleague, Dr. Kavita, who she also is having some health issues, and so she's not practicing the way she used to. And I was like, look at us, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Like, what are we good at? And she's taught for years, and so we kind of said, well, we like to help people, and we have good experiences in kind of looking at what a chart note should contain. And also, we've both been in private practice, so we know what the challenges are.
Yeah.
So having somebody, if you don't have a colleague that's going to take the time or that you don't trust, reaching out to somebody like you for you to come in. Or finding somebody, I guess.
Get an extra set of eyes on your documentation. When you're so in it, it's hard to see. It's hard to spot out the holes. That it's so much easier for somebody else from the outside to look in and go, does the story of this chart, of this experience with this patient, does it make sense? Does it line up? Do the details match? And it's so interesting. When we talked about our chart audit program, we realized that this was an area that people just don't dabble in. It's one of the areas of greatest risk in a practice, right? It's one of the things that can get you into so much trouble, and yet it's one of those areas that nobody's really helping with. And so I know you and I and Dr. Kavita, we all felt very passionate about being able to provide support. And it doesn't have to be a chart audit program. Again, if you've got a friend that is willing to just look at 5 charts and go point out the holes in these charts, do something to get an extra set of eyes on your charts.
And that's where, one thing when we were starting, and I kind of thought, well, is this the pot calling the kettle black? I'm going to go pick on somebody else's chart notes and are mine perfect? No.
Right.
They're not. We're dealing with human beings.
Right.
And so, what am I doing then? Well, part of my own internal chart auditing is, like we just talked about, the 2 remote people that are remoting in.
Yeah.
We have a 3rd remote person that helps us on Fridays. She used to work with us, moved to South Carolina. She doesn't work in her practice, so she remotes in and helps us on phones. But so when she's on the phone and a patient's asking for this or asking about that, she's having to go into the chart note. And if it doesn't make sense to her, that's another internal chart audit.
Yeah.
We also have, there's 4 of us who kind of help in the practice. And so if I'm on a day that it was a Dr. So-and-so patient, I'm going, I don't know where we are with this. Well, that's a problem. So it's like we're all kind of internally auditing and bringing that up and bringing that to light. So that would be the other thing. Are you taking the time to bring it to light? And the answer usually is no. It's a very uncomfortable spot to be in because you see your vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And it brings an attitude. God damn it, why pay these people to do this? I thought this was being done. I just want to. So it does, it's a very sensitive area because you are opening yourself up to be judged, honestly. Right. And the thing that I say about that is, would you rather be judged by your peers and somebody who's there to help you? Or would you rather be judged by the state board or by the court of the public?
Right.
And so which would be worse? So it's uncomfortable, but it is what it is. Or an insurance audit. And so these people are certainly not your friends.
Right.
And are going to be more than happy to throw you, to the wolves. So what are you doing to protect yourself?
Right. Right. I agree completely. And again, I just feel like this is an area of the practice that, first of all, we can easily overlook it because we're in the trenches, focusing on these patients and providing the services, that this is kind of the thing that falls to the bottom of the pile. At the end of the day, when we have the choice between training our team and equipping our team to do this well and staying to double check those details and making sure that everything is, above board, we're tired and we're choosing to kind of go, I'll get back to that later. But it is such a critical area of the practice. It always has been. I just feel like the heat has been turned up on that pot, and that it can just take one little thing to boil it over and cause a patient to complain now, or not even to the state board, but just to complain to you as an office. And if we don't have these details covered, we can really find ourselves in a world of trouble. So taking the time, which I think is a great first suggestion, to either reach out to a colleague. You could reach out to, somebody that really has very little dental experience, like you were talking about with your account person, that they've got just enough dental to be able to kind of partially understand, and just say, read this. Does this make sense to you as far as determining a really good actual chart note? If they can't follow the story of what happened in an appointment, then there's a pretty good chance that that's not a good note. So just getting extra eyes on it. And I think, to your point that you made earlier, allowing yourself to be vulnerable in that this is not an opportunity to begin to just lash out at team members who haven't held up their end of the deal. This is not an opportunity for you to just throw your hands up and throw a big hissy fit. This is meant to be a moment where, yes, you're vulnerable, but you're also humble enough to admit, this is an area of the practice that I've neglected, and we are no longer going to neglect it. We are all going to move forward, paying closer attention to this. So I think that's the other component to it.
And it's definitely, when you think about it from I'm spending time on something that I'm not producing. I'm having to stop and train the team and spend the time and do all. There's nothing from a dentist perspective that is fun about this. It actually gets your piss meter up very high, honestly, because it's just, I farm this out. Can't anybody else do anything? So I think just going in with, I know that that's the feel and the vibe, but you got to figure out how you're going to get over that.
Yeah.
And then for the thing, true, on the surface, it's not something that is going to make you money, but darned if it's not one of the things that's going to save you thousands.
Yes.
If and when you have to explain yourself and get a lawyer on board.
Right.
So it's come to that society that is where we are. And I think that's another part of the problem is a lot of people go, no, nobody I know has had a state board complaint. Nobody I know has this. Oh, that just happens to other people.
Yeah. Don't kid yourself with that lie. Don't kid yourself, because it happens a lot more than people think, and people don't often share when they're in that situation. So this is oftentimes a hidden area when a doctor finds himself or herself in a board complaint situation. That's not something that they're openly sharing and being real talkative about. So don't kid yourself into thinking that this has not happened to anybody I know. Chances are it has. And you haven't heard about it.
And who would? Who would share that? Nobody's going to share that.
To talk about that.
Yeah. So I will, again, I'm not above sharing my dirty laundry. So one experience with me and a board complaint, and of course it just devastates you, scares you, breaks your heart, all of that. A couple of years ago, got a board complaint that basically we did sealants that were not consented to. So, by the way, we ended up spending, it took my office manager 2 days. So if you talk about like costs and all of that, and like, do I have time to really not see patients and have to sit there and do my documentation and all that? Yes, because it's going to cost you otherwise. So it took my office manager 2 days to scan everything in and send it off to the board and fill out all their paperwork and all the stuff that they require you to send in. So for those of you that don't know, when you're sending stuff in to the board for a complaint, they want all of your CE, your BLS, your assistants, whoever it was involved with patient care. They want all of that stuff. They want your emergency plan. They want your schedule for the days. I mean, there's a lot involved of what you have to send in for a mere complaint. And so this actually story can, there's a lot of things that come out of this other than just even documentation. But her complaint was that we did sealants that she did not consent to. And when I went back and we looked at it, she did consent to. And luckily we had that documented and it was signed. And then there were 2 teeth that were not going to be covered by insurance. And so she had opted out of those. So we did not seal those. Well, it turns out there were 2 more that insurance decided not to pay for. And so she got a bill for $60 for these 2 sealants. And so this, again, I'm kind of pivoting here, but one of the things was why didn't you just write that off? Like that would have summed it up right there, write off $60. And that's exactly what I said to my AR person. I was like, are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind? Why wouldn't you just write off $60 for 2 sealants? This is so not worth going through all of this. And she had left, of course, a terrible Yelp review and had complained to the board and all this. So when we dug into what happened, actually, she was one who came in going, I'm a single mom, I'm divorced, I have to fight with my husband to pay for things, so I'm not paying anything that insurance doesn't cover, right? And we've talked about that in another podcast, how, I mean, this was a few years ago, but I am so strict about that now, that if that is your concern, then please leave. You're out. Because I don't know what your insurance is going to cover. So anyway, apparently when we checked the history and the benefits and all of that, insurance told us they were going to cover all of these. We're not going to cover these 2 reseals. And so we didn't do those 2. We did the others. So I said to my AR person, look, out of the 8 sealants that we did, we got paid on 6. Why did you just not write off 2 more?
Right.
What is wrong with you? And her response was, well, this mom was so rude to me. She was rude to me. She was screaming at me. She was, very belligerent on the phone. And she has a history of that. And so when I paused and I went, you know what? We did that to ourselves because when she'd come in 3 years ago squeaking about whatever wasn't covered, and
we would accommodate her.
We accommodated it. And that had been going on for 3 years. And so now finally this AR person's like, she was so rude, and I told her we're not going to write it off. Well, so that's kind of where that ended. We hadn't sent her to collections or anything on it because it was $60. It wasn't worth it. Well, you fast forward to, I do a patient appreciation every year. And in order to sign up for patient appreciation, by the way, I probably spend, I don't know, $60 to $70 per family for patient appreciation. It's a very expensive event for me, but I love doing it. So this woman calls to RSVP her kids for patient appreciation. Well, one of the stipulations for patient appreciation is you've got to have been seen in the office over the past year, and you haven't left a bad review, and you're a good patient, you don't have a balance, etc. Well, the person on the phone who answered it said, yes, I would be happy to RSVP you. She looks up the woman. She's like, oh, by the way, you have a $60 balance. Let me take care of that for you. That way I can sign your kids up for. I told you I'm not paying that balance. That's a stupid rule. She hangs up. And that is the same day that she left a Yelp review and that she complained to the state board.
And she did the board complaint. Oh.
So again, talk about your friends. This was a patient of record for 3 years. Now, did we have missteps? Should we have just written that off? Did we poke the bear? On the other hand, how long do I have to be a doormat and a chump and let you just walk all over me? So I think at that point, luckily, though, at the end, what saved us was our great documentation.
Yes.
And we had the consent signed, and we had the note about her, whatever. We had intraoral photos that showed the staining and the start of decay and why we were trying to seal that before that took off. So, I mean, we had everything clearly delineated, and sure enough, the board dismissed it. There was nothing to follow up on. It had her signature here, it had her signature there, it had the chart note here, and it had the photo there. But my heart goes out to somebody who doesn't have all of that.
Yeah, it would have been a different story had you gone through and submitted all of that and the documentation wasn't there.
And can you imagine having to head down to Austin over sealants?
Oh.
And I've heard that happen to colleagues of mine. And again, when I'd heard that years ago, I was like, that doesn't really happen. I must not know the whole story. Well, here I am in that very boat.
Wow.
And so I was thanking the stars that we had all the documentation that we had. And we had the documented history of all of the write-offs and all of the squeaky wheels and of all of that. But you know what? Honestly, the state board doesn't care about that.
They don't.
They care about, did this woman consent or not?
Right.
And that was clearly shown in both the notes and the everything that was signed, and
I think that's a perfect example. Again, that's not thankfully you're willing to share that story, and again, it hopefully makes it real for our listeners that even you who's sitting here talking about the importance of chart notes and the details there, and we just talked about people don't really share this, they're not going to. You share it. It happened to you. And thankfully...
And we've had Medicaid complaints when we were Medicaid providers. And it was the documentation that saved me on that. When we've had other patients threaten to complain, we've had documentation on that. So it's not a one-off that I've been saved by.
Right. Yeah, that's a perfect example. So yes, I agree with you completely on that. Is don't kid yourself into thinking that this isn't a reality. It's a very present reality. We can speak to that based on what we know, and just trust our word, listeners, that this is more relevant than you think it is, and you need to really take the time to admit, hey, this is an area that we need to focus on, and then to take active steps. The first step being bring in a neutral set of eyes that tells you whether or not you have a problem. Invest in training. Invest your time in making sure that you're protected from a documentation standpoint. Well, thanks for joining me. I knew this would be a topic that you and I are both passionate about. I just hope that we've communicated that passion to our listeners. And listeners, please reach out to us if you have questions on this topic. We're happy to engage with you. We're very passionate about protecting practices and practice owners from a documentation standpoint.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.